Hello, my kitties and lions. Welcome to my review of Cats, 2019, the movie. All right, let's start with the concept of a cat. What is a cat? As the show very clearly explains, a cat is not a dog. Not a dog. A cat is aloof, mysterious. There's some debate as to whether cats are even really domesticated. So we have to start from understanding what a cat is to understand the miracle that is Cats, the musical. What Cats is not about. Number one, literal cats. Cats is not about literal cats. Number two, good versus evil. This is a conceptual show. This is not about bad guy and traditional hero arc. This is a story about the experience of being a cat and being reborn into a new, wonderful, fluffy life. Drugs or alcohol. This is not a story about drugs or alcohol, even though it was made in the 80s, and even though if you go to see Cats, the movie, you might enjoy it more if you were drinking or on some type of drug. Cat puns. Now, there are cat puns in the original T.S. Eliot book, but there are not as many cat puns as the cat puns that are in the movie. And I also feel like we need to be selective about our cat puns. For example, one of the puns in the stage show is that Gus the theater cat, his real name is Asparagus. So it's like, haha, they named him Asparagus, but we call him Gus. And it's unexpected, so you get sort of like a haughty theater laugh. But other cat puns, like stating the obvious, like saying, oh, cat burglar. It's just like, what is this, a 5-year-old joke book? No. Cats is not about cat puns. I think we need to look at this through the lens of the avant-garde. After World War I and the devastation that so many Europeans were facing, having had people literally killed in their backyards, there emerged an art movement called Dadaism. And the idea behind Dadaism is that the world is such a dark and scary and terrible place that the only way to make meaning of it is to acknowledge that there is no meaning. There is no meaning, and that our mind tries to create meaning where there is no meaning, because that's essentially how we cope. And so there were some famous, really famous pieces of art. So for example, Duchamp put a male urinal on the wall and people debated, is this art? But in the context of the time, it was a reaction against a world that was dark and nonsensical, and the recognition that the structures of that society didn't make sense. And so art, or essentially anti-art, didn't make sense. Now, if we look at cats that way, I think we start from a better frame of understanding why Cats is so popular. You know, we come to the early 1980s. We're coming off of the Vietnam War. We're coming off of the oil crisis, the Iranian crisis. We're in a world of hedonism and 1980s greed and cocaine and Wall Street and big hair, in which the leading shows are all people dressed as human beings singing and doing human being things. And we have this show that's about nothing. It is like Dadaism contained. It is its own beast. It is a cat in the wilderness. It is not a show with a plot. And I think you have to come into the show knowing that. There used to be a bar in our neighborhood that was called the Piratz Tavern, and it was literally spelled Pirates with the Ritz spelled R-A-T-Z. Piratz. And you would go to this restaurant, people were dressed and singing pirate songs, and the food was terrible. And basically, you go there to drink really cheap rum. And bottom line is, people would go to this bar, and then they would complain about the pirates, and that the bar was dirty and the food was terrible. Well, you went to a bar called the Piratz Tavern, where the pirate word has the literal word rat in it. So if you're going to cats and your objection is that this is a story about cats, well, I hate to tell you, but they warned you at the beginning of the story. So you've got to come into it with this framework. And if you don't like Cats, you're probably not going to like Cats, the Broadway show, or Cats, the movie. This is not, for example, something where you just listen to it because you love the soundtrack, or you just watch it because you like the dancing, but it's about the magical combination of music and dancing. If you go back and you watch old musicals, you'll see that they're like, la 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 la, and then they stop talking and they dance. They do all their dance, and then they come back and they talk or they sing. And that's because we have lungs as humans, and those lungs have a limited capacity to be able to hold breath. And so to be able to sing from your diaphragm and to sound decent while you are dancing is not very easy to do. Now, in the olden days of the theater, in the early 1900s, when you had vaudeville, you had people who were a triple threat. So Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers and Judy Garland and all of these folks, where they could sing, they could dance, they could act, they could look pretty, they could look hideous, they could do all kind of different things. And you had to do that because if you are in a one-man variety show or a three-man variety show that's a vaudevillian show, and you've got to shake it up every night, you have to be able to rotate between these different types of performances. So what's amazing about Cats is you have people doing incredibly, insanely Cirque du Soleil level athleticism and singing at the same time. It would be like if a football team came out in the middle of a play and belted out a song while they were still playing football. Like, that is the level we're talking about. And there's almost nothing else that you'll see in the theater where they are dancing to as extreme as they are dancing in Cats, and then able to come and sing. So what's Cats about? If it's not about cats, really, and it's not about a plot, what is Cats about? Well, there's some really strong themes in Cats, and this is where I feel like Cats the movie goes off the rails a bit. Cats the movie is kind of like if you got drunk and you watched a bunch of cats in the street and you thought, gosh, I wish they looked more like humans and had fingers and toes. And could we maybe do something with that, but in a cyberpunk setting, and then make the cats wear clothes made out of cat fur so that it's not really clear if they're naked or if they're cannibals or what's going on. Whereas Cats the musical, you got to think of it through the mind of a theater goer. You go into a small theater, and most of the theaters in New York, you got itty bitty seats. So, for example, I went to see the Cats revival that was last on Broadway a couple years back, and you're in these tiny chairs in these old theaters, you know, so you're cramped here next to these strangers, and it's dark and it's weird. And for the set in Cats, it takes place in a junkyard. So there's junk everywhere. So it's kind of like Cracker Barrel, but it's all outsized because you're the same size as a cat. And so there's a tire, but it's a huge tire. It's a huge tire, as if you were cat size. There's also that sense of imagination. This is where I think we can learn from musicals like The Lion King. So The Lion King came out in the early 90s. It was a wonderful animated production, and then they made it into a stage show. And this is where I feel like we're getting to a weird place where movie makers are it's almost like they think we have no imagination. When The Lion King animated, became a stage show. They changed the format of the show. And so it didn't become about literal lions. It became about an African tribe where people were wearing headdresses to represent different animals. And that really worked contextually in that new medium. So when we come back to this hyper-realistic Lion King that came out last year, you lose some of that story, because at the heart of it, the main part of the story is not that there are literal animals in a kingdom, but it is this father and son tale that's told through the perspective or through the allegory of animals. Now, Cats, in the same way, is telling us stories about fundamental experiences of living. The idea of the in-group versus the out-group. So you have the Jellicle cats, and they're there, and Grisabella comes along, and she's all crazy looking, and then everyone's like, ugh, and they reject her. You kind of get the sense of like the community versus not the community. So that's the first really big abstract theme. The second one that's really strong, and it comes out in the signature song, is this story about aging and memory, but through the lens of nostalgia. So memory is not necessarily a song about all good things. It's a mixed bag. And you've got two characters that really sort of drive this point home. You have Gus the theater cat, and Gus the theater cat was a very established actor, and he had a very successful career. And now he's got what they describe as palsy, but essentially would be Parkinson's in modern parlance. And he's at the end of his life, right? And the end of his career. And he's looking back. What does it mean? And who was I in my glory days? And Grisabella's story is very much a similar story. Only for her, she was this beautiful, glamorous cat, and then she was discarded. And so she has, in addition to those really beautiful memories, she is rejected. And you've got those two running in parallel. So over here we have Gus, the theater cat. He's respected, he's revered. So he looks back on his past in a positive way, even though he's now aging. So nostalgia is, for him, a chance to relive his younger life. Grisabella, on the other hand, it's mixed for her. The last big theme that's related to these two cats in particular is this idea of redemption and rebirth. And, you start with sort of the frame of cats have 9 lives, and you've got these stories of cats who've done numerous things, and a lot of it is fluff, like a lot of cats. Okay, you got the railway cats, you got the cat burglars, you got the sort of rock and roll cat, whatever. This is sort of color, I think, to fill in just the diversity of experiences in this community. But then the moving part of Cats is this redemption arc, and the idea that even if you had shining moments in your life and then experienced tragedy, that there is some hope for rebirth and renewal and redemption. And that's really the story arc that we see with Grisabella. And the reason that the song Memory is so powerful is that it is that song about the potential of a comeback. So this is Judy Garland singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow at Carnegie Hall, not Judy Garland singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow in The Wizard of Oz when she was young and beautiful and she hadn't married any guys who happened to turn out to be gay, and she hadn't gotten addicted to drugs, and she didn't have all these kids, and her bangs weren't weird and whatever. This is the person who is beaten down and who is just at their wits' end, who does not want to live, and they are having, for a bleak moment, just a blip of time, a little ray of sunshine open up. And then they are redeemed. Okay, so let's talk about the movie and what went wrong in the movie. Now, the first one, I think, is what you'll see in a lot of the reviews, which is, what are we looking at here? Are these people, or are they cats, or are they aliens? Like, are we in an alternate universe where maybe like people have evolved into cats and now we're all like different tribes of cats, and some cats are jellicle cats and some cats are house cats, and rats and cockroaches are also vaudevillian stars? It's not really clear, and there's a lot of visual storytelling here that sort of works against itself. So, for example, some cats have clothes made out of fur, and some cats don't. Some cats have human hands and feet. Some cats have cat feet. Some cats have paws. Some cats are wearing collars. Some cats are, have hyper-realistic faces. So I think from the get-go, what the reviews have picked up on is visual storytelling is not consistent. I actually think what doesn't work about this movie is it is not weird enough. I think there's a decision that the people who made Cats, they tried to have the dancing with the singing and with a literal interpretation of what a cat is in this world. And the problem with that is, if you want to show us how amazing the dancing is, it needs to look real. I mean, anybody can CGI dance, right? I mean, I could CGI become a genie in a bottle, or a belly dancer, or, a trapeze artist. You can't, if you're going to have literal cats, you can't also have literal cats who are dancing like humans. And so then when you add on to that sort of the audio effect of the dancers panting, the same way it would be in a stage show. You're in a stage show, someone's up there, they're dancing, they're singing, they're sweating, and if you sit too close, sometimes this happens in theater, you sit too close, and the singer will spit on you, or they'll fling sweat on you, and that's just, for better or for worse, part of the theater going experience. But when you're listening to a movie and you can hear the breathing sounds, it's kind of weird, especially when you don't know, like, is that a real person? Is that a CGI person? Am I listening to a robot breathe? It's just creepy. So I think that's part of it, is they either needed to go really, really, really avant-garde, or they needed to bring it down and make it more realistic. The reason I say it would work if it's weirder is there are moments in the movie that are incredible. And they are moments where the movie kind of embraces the strangeness of the story. The standout moment, Jennifer Hudson singing Memory. Like, seriously, Jennifer Hudson, despite her cat face and whiskers, brought me to tears, because you could hear in her vocal performance just the intensity of emotion. And if you know anything about Jennifer Hudson, and you know about the tragedy of her family being killed, and just her personal experiences, and then the passion and intensity she brings with her voice, and the emotion that she allows us to witness on her face, which with the new CGI additions, they've made it so you see more of her face. So you have like cat hair here, and then you have like tears and snot, which is a little weird. But if you're really just listening to the sound of it, it's an amazing interpretation of the song. And she's bringing with it that vulnerability that really makes great music. And it almost takes you out of this really, truly awful film and puts you into this transcendent place. There are other little spots like that where it really works because it's so weird. So, for example, Ian McKellen is playing the theater cat. And I think they handle pieces in the stage show that haven't aged really well. So, like, in the stage show, there's Gus, the theater cat, reenacts, like, this previous stage show. And there was this song that had incredible music about Growl Tiger, but it also happened to have kind of racist lyrics. And it became more and more controversial because we're not living in the 80s anymore, and our society is advancing in some ways. They replaced it. But the new song on the show the music is not as good as Grail Tiger, and it's about dogs fighting in the park. And when you see the stage show, if you're familiar with the original soundtrack, you're kind of like, huh. And the way they deal with it in the movie, spoiler alert, is they have Grail Tiger become an actual character, and they have Gus, have a victory over Grail Tiger. And I think that works a lot better. It allows us to hear in the background the score from the Grail Tiger song, which is really incredible, but without having in our face sort of the narrative piece that had the insensitive components to it. There was also moments where James Gordon was telling jokes, and I think some of that kind of worked because he was poking fun at the absurdity of cats, and as a character in a movie, could really stand in as an audience member. But the challenge is that they didn't really let him make a whole lot of jokes, and so there's some missed opportunities. I also think there was just some weirdness. Bone jewelry. Why are the cats wearing jewels made out of bones? And whose bones are there? It's almost like there's this Blade Runner sci-fi element of cats wearing cat stuff and wearing bone jewelry, and then other regular cats, which I guess are like prey for the creepy cats. But it's not really clear. But that might be an interesting sequel, to see the cats that cannibalize other cats and how that affects the whole Nine Lives thing. If you close your eyes and you don't look at the ridiculous of the scene with Taylor Swift, but you just listen to the vocals, very good, very good. And I thought Mr. Mistopheles, it was a good reinterpretation for the movie, because in the stage show, Mr. Mistopheles comes out and he's in a matador jacket, and it's a little weird. A lot of the cats are just in leotards, but here's this guy in a jacket, and you're like, okay, whatever, it's cats. And it lights up. And then in the most recent productions of the show, his jacket lights up, so he snaps his hands, and then all the lights around the stage and the theater light up. So it's like a rainbow effect, and there's sparkles everywhere, and he's like da 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 da. And they didn't do that in the movie. They made a different narrative choice in the way that they told the story of Mr. Mistopheles. But I thought that it worked because, again, the vocal performance told the story for us. The sexy tiger decided, okay, we're going to go in a hip-hop direction, but they only let him sort of go in a hip-hop direction, and they missed opportunities there to really give us a new experience. And then there were other places where they just rewrote the songs. So the two cat burglars, it was the exact same lyrics with really bad music, and you're just sitting there thinking maybe they didn't get the rights to this one song, or... But yeah, that's it. That's my hot take on cats. Let me just say that despite all the weirdness, I totally loved it. I think the soundtrack is great. It's worth watching if you like theater. And if you don't like theater, let's be honest, you probably weren't going to go anyways. So, see you later.